Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Doing all right. It's been kind of a hectic week, but getting ready to try to go on a little vacation tomorrow.
Yeah, a little vacation. You know, we're a bit in the dead zone, a bit of the NFL schedule. Not the true dead zone, which is what I would say is the NFL draft until training camp. But we're in that, that period between free agency. We just talked about free agency on our last podcast. If you want to hear us break down all the Packers' exciting moves, go back and listen to that one. But we're in that period, we got about 4 or 5 weeks until the NFL draft now. We're kind of just hearing a lot of the same talking points regurgitated. We're in peak rumor season. I think I've seen 3 different guaranteed number 2 picks. Like, Jaden Daniels, 100% going at number 2. And we got Drake May, 100% going to number 2. Or 100% the Vikings are trading up to 3 for him. I mean, it is peak rumor season. It is peak news season, fake news season for the NFL. Everything is flying around. Don't believe everything you read right now, especially this part of the year. But, we figured since free agency is done, a lot of the Packers' needs, maybe not a lot, but some of the Packers' needs have been addressed in free agency, that this would be a perfect time for us to do our first, I think, official on-podcast mock draft of the year. We've been doing mock drafts on our Twitter for, the past month or two, mock draft Mondays. You might notice we did not do a mock draft Monday this week because we wanted to save it for this episode. But yeah, so we figured, with free agency mostly being done, wanted to move on to doing, our first mock draft and just kind of see what it might look like for the Packers in when it comes to April, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th. It's in somewhere in those dates. I always forget if it's going to start the 25th or the 26th this year. But yeah, we figured we might as well start with that. Before we do, though, just wanted to touch on a couple of news items for Green Bay that happened since we last recorded last week. The first of which is that the Packers have re-signed corner Robert Rochelle. He was, mostly a special team player for the Packers. They could have tendered him, but they chose not to and let him become a free agent, but then just, re-signed him after that so they could pay him a little less money. According to Paul Brettel on Twitter, he played 141 special team snaps for the Packers last year and was their 7th highest graded special teamer per PFF. Beyond that, some more departures. Josh Nijman signed with the Panthers on a 2-year, $8 million deal. So some more offensive line depth going out the door for the Packers, suddenly looking a little bit thinner at that spot. Something to think about for this upcoming mock draft that we're about to do. And then the final thing is that we have some details on Corey Ballantyne's contract. It is not a minimum as kind of we initially expected for, a guy who's like corner 4, corner 5. But he was rewarded, for some of his good play. He got a solid 1-year, $2.1 million contract from the Packers. So that's very exciting for him. Congratulations to him. He definitely, I think, deserved it. He played really well in spot duty for when Jair and Eric Stokes were missing time. And I think, in that Vikings game, you could say it had more to do with the Vikings quarterback situation, but he locked down Justin Jefferson pretty well. And obviously that's not really the expectation for him, but, even having one game that good is amazing for a corner 4, corner 5 on a team. Dad, any thoughts on the 3 of those moves? I think the biggest one, in my opinion, is that Josh Nijman one. He has been a guy who's been, the swing tackle in Green Bay for a little while. And, now he's going out the door. But what do you think of those 3 moves?
Yeah, I think after the first wave of free agency went by and then Yash was still out there for a while, there was a little bit of wonder, maybe they'll be able to get him back as a swing tackle on the Packers. So that's because they've lost a lot of their depth with Bakhtiari and Yash and Runyon all gone.
Yeah, each and every one of them gone. I was a little surprised to see Runyon makes so much more money than Yash. I'm a little surprised the market for Yash wasn't any bigger than it was. I know he didn't exactly have his best year last year. I know there was stuff about, effort and, practice habits that Adam Stenovich talked about where it's like, if he came in to play harder, he'd be having that starting spot, but he hasn't. And then I know Matt LaFleur had to go out the next day and walk those things back a little bit. But I do think we've seen Josh Nijman play at like a serviceable, like above average tackle play. And to get that for, I think, just $4 million a year is in a year where offensive linemen seem to be getting paid a lot. I'm a little surprised that Nijman didn't go for any more than that, but wish him the best in Carolina. Any thoughts on either Rochelle or that Ballantyne contract, or do you want to get into this mock draft?
Yeah, I was also just kind of expecting the Ballantyne one to be a minimum. I imagine Rochelle's going to be the minimum. Have you heard?
No, I don't think we have any details, and we still don't have full details on the Keyshawn Nixon contract either, which is a little surprising.
Oh, even though we got the total numbers, but not the year by year breakdown.
Not the year by year breakdown, and I don't think we know the guarantees yet either. So,
Okay.
bit of a mystery there on that one still. But hopefully we'll see in the next week. And, keep an eye on our Twitter, @FatherSonPacker. We'll be tweeting out all those updates and all those Packers-related news stuff. We're also going to be doing Mock Draft Mondays going forward. This is the only week we didn't, since we're doing a mock draft on the episode itself. And then we'll be, keeping up with Packers news, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you like what you hear there, subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We'll be covering the draft up until the draft, an episode every single week. And then after the draft, we'll be doing an episode every single week, breaking down the Packers selections in depth and doing a real deep dive into each player. Very exciting. Packers have a league-leading 11 draft picks in this upcoming draft, so even more fodder to add to what is already the youngest roster in the league, or at least was the youngest roster in the league last year. I'm not sure. I mean, they only got younger, so maybe they're still the youngest roster in the league.
I think one player in their 30s now. Preston is the only player on the team left in their 30s.
They have one player over 28 years old.
One player
just
over 28
Preston.
even. Just Preston.
Which is wild. And then the next oldest is Kenny. But yeah, so very, very young team. But yeah, Dad, I guess let's just get into this mock draft. So today we are using PFF's Mock Draft Simulator. It's probably the best for my money out there in terms of having a good interface to use, giving you a wide variety of information with each player. I recommend going and just messing around with it if you're interested in all the draft stuff. But so we're going to be doing a 7-round mock. We're not going to be doing any trades just because we'll be here until the cows come home if we did trades in this one. But we'll be talking through, what we think at each pick and some of the players available, why we might be going one player over another, and mainly we're actually going to be doing this as a more predictive mock in terms of what we think the Packers would do if presented with these scenarios, rather than what we would do. Yes.
So we want to go in there and control the Bears pick too, just for fun?
No.
At number one, and give them somebody
But the whole point
really
of the predictive mock is just so that none of this can blow back on us. If we pick someone bad, it's just because, hey, no, we just think the Packers would do it.
What the Packers would do.
Nothing to do with our evaluations. We think all the good players are good and all the bad players are bad.
And we'll tell you which is which in a couple of years.
Yes.
Who we
Give
thought.
it maybe 3 or 4,
3 or 4 years, we'll be able to tell you what we thought.
Yeah, and, we'll have 1 or 2 misses just to throw you off the scent, but otherwise we are omniscient. But anyway, Dad, let's get to it. Let's start this draft. Moving on to the 25th pick in the NFL draft. The Packers are on the clock, and it's an interesting group of players here, Dad, to choose from. I think
a little different than some I see.
I know. So this is an interesting spot. So for the Packers here, the players available are Jer'Jon Newton, a.k.a. Johnny Newton, a defensive interior player out of Illinois who also plays a lot of defensive end. Amarius Mims, tackle out of Georgia, who is extremely athletic, but has a low amount of experience. He only started 8 games at Georgia and has dealt with ankle injuries, but he is a freak of nature. You see these pictures of him next to people at the combine, reporters at the combine, and he just looks like the Colossus of Rhodes practically. I mean, this guy is a tank.
6'7", 340.
Yes, but definitely a tackle only. Another player available is Graham Barton, the tackle out of Duke. Now, this is an interesting player for the Packers because he's played all 5 offensive line spots. Specifically, center and tackle are his 2 biggest pieces of experience. But people think that he could play all 5 of those spots. And then, another player just to throw in the mix here that would be maybe up for the Packers, but probably less so with them taking McKinney, is Tyler Nubin, who, for my mind, is the best safety in the class. I actually like him better than Cooper DeJean. But he's safety out of Minnesota. Could pair well with McKinney in terms of both of them would be pretty versatile, able to do, if they wanted to switch which safety is deep, which safety is in the box, here and there. I think Nubin could be an interesting pick. But Dad, of those 4, because I think it would be between those 4, what are your thoughts on that? And is there anyone else that is available there that you would be looking at for the Packers?
Yeah, I think this is too early to pick the next guy on the list, Peyton Wilson, as he'll be 24.
Yeah, Peyton Wilson, who, if you don't know, is a linebacker out of North Carolina State. The rub on him is he's super athletic. He's probably the best linebacker in the class. The issue with him is he's had a lot of injuries in his career. He's had a couple of torn ACLs. He has had a couple of dislocated shoulders, and he's a little on the older side. So it's something to keep in mind. I think he's actually also the brother of a player who plays for the Brewers. So that's interesting.
Oh, goodness. I did not know that.
Yeah, so
I
just a
missed
little
that.
tidbit. But yeah, I also think it would be a little early for Wilson as well. But we've been surprised by the Packers before, but so I'm glad you touched on that. For me,
Yeah, I also see that Jackson Powers Johnson just got picked. The pick before us is a guy we've both liked.
yeah, Jackson Powers Johnson, center out of Oregon. For those of you who don't know, they call him SpongeBob SquarePants because he's built like SpongeBob SquarePants. He has a really big torso, and he is just a big square. Freak center out of Oregon, though, and dominated the Senior Bowl. Is someone who I would love if he was available for the Packers to pick, but he's not available in this exercise. But Deb, for me, I would be between Johnny Newton and Graham Barton here. Although I could see the Packers falling in love with the athletic potential of Amarius Mims. However, with him, he's a little less flexible in terms of where you could deploy him, because we know the Packers love talking about their best five up front. And he would essentially be locked into a tackle spot, and then you probably wouldn't be able to play Rasheed Walker. Or you'd move Zach Tom inside. So, I mean, there are a lot of avenues there where you could make it work. What are your thoughts on that?
So that's one of my thoughts on Mims, is he's basically tackle only, and maybe not somebody the Packers would be interested in. I don't think they'll pick a first-round safety this year, not after signing. If they hadn't signed McKinney, then I say probably Nubin would have a very good chance of being the pick here. Jerzon Newton is kind of tempting. It seems like he's fallen a bit, but I don't know if they'll go with a intensive defensive interior lineman in the first round again.
And one thing to keep in mind with Newton is he's fallen a little bit. The main reason he's fallen is he had, I believe, a foot injury that has kept him out of a lot of the pre-draft testing. So that's been, but I do think, based solely on tape and assuming medicals are clean, that he's the best player available on this board in terms of, I think he's the best player of these like 4 or 5 that we're looking at. I do think that, you come into an area where you're like, okay, so who are we taking off the field then? Like, you got Kenny, you got Wyatt, you got Carl Brooks. Newton has played a lot of, defensive end, but he's a bigger guy, so I don't think he'd play, a 4-3 D end. Are you taking Wyatt off the field for him? Do you just not care? Are you just going to dominate up front in the trenches? I think that's a fine, place to be if you want to be like, hey, we're just going to take the best player and we're just going to rotate these guys through. They're going to be ultra fresh. We're going to be like, the Eagles that won the Super Bowl back in 2017, 2018, I think it was. We're going to be like the Niners who, when they had Armstead and Buckner and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's an argument there. My question to you, Dad, about offensive line. So I know the amount of time we're spending on this first pick does not bode well for us getting through this episode.
It's just like the regular draft where, you get more time on the earlier rounds.
Yes. So here's my thing. I think offensive line
I make no promises that will be any faster later.
I think offensive line is a really big need for the Packers in terms of they don't have a lot of depth. And I think there are places they can improve. Like, I think you can improve from Myers at center. You need a new right guard with Runyon leaving. And I don't know that we necessarily trust Sean Rhyan to be a starting level guard right now. And then I think Rasheed Walker is good, but you could improve there at left tackle. And it's a premium position, and you don't want to settle on good.
I would say you got 3 spots, 3 out of the 5 spots you would actually be happy to upgrade.
Yes. My question is, if I asked you what Brian Gutekunst's best talent as an evaluator is, what would you say? Because I would say it is his ability to evaluate offensive line.
And to get good ones late.
Yes. And so that's where I was kind of going for it was, are you taking away the thing that you're best at as a scouting department when you're investing high picks in offensive line? And maybe I'm just overthinking it, but the thing that Gutekunst seems to be best at is getting hits on offensive linemen late in the draft. We're talking about guys like, Zach Tom, so 4th round pick. Rasheed Walker, who's played some really great snaps for them, 7th round pick. You go down the line, you've got John Runyon was a 6th round pick, and he started, he was a very serviceable guard for the Packers for a while. The highest he's taken a lineman so far in his 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 26 drafts is number 44 with Elton Jenkins, the high in the 2nd round. Then he also took, Josh Myers in the 2nd round as well. But I guess my question is, are you handicapping your best skill investing premium picks at offensive line? I think that's one way you could look at it. And then the other is like, hey, we have a lot of good finesse blockers, but we could get someone who's great at both if we invested premium capital in it. Where do you like land on each side of that?
I'm thinking a little bit more about, well, there are some offensive linemen I like in the next couple of rounds as well, where there are some good tackles I think that seem to be like they would be available in rounds 2 or 3, and interior offensive linemen. However, I do think that they're going to take maybe 3, again this year.
3, maybe 4. I mean, we've seen, I know people are talking about reactions to first of all, it's a very good offensive line class. It's probably one of the best offensive line classes we've had in a little while. And then second, we see how much guards are getting paid. Even average guards like John Runyon, who wasn't even a full-time starter, is getting $10 million a year. And so is it time to just fill the depth with just tons and tons of like 5 or 6 linemen, maybe even, and just say, hey, we got depth. We're going to be all right.
Well, the other reason I would say to argue to get one early is that because it is a good offensive line class, this is a draft to get premium talent.
Yeah. However,
rather than reach in another position, though, then you can say, well, other positions are thinner, and so you want to get those guys sooner.
I think that you could argue it both ways. We have to remember we're doing a predictive what the Packers would do mock. I think that they would take Newton here because I think they love freak athletes on the defensive line, and they like taking defense in the first round. I know that's kind of an oversimplification, but they like taking defense in the first round. That's kind of how I'm feeling here. What do you think?
I was leaning towards Barton, a multi-positional offensive lineman.
Tell me why you were leaning Barton.
But it's actually
tell me why you were leaning Barton over Mims in terms of if you were because you're picking between the two of them. It sounds like.
Yeah. So, and neither Barton nor Newton have done the full testing, so we're kind of assuming how athletic they are.
True.
Based on tape when we haven't been able to get testing, and I don't know if we will. Mims, I think, because he's basically tackle only, is why I would lean Barton instead. I think if they're going to have there'll be a bigger impact on the team if they upgrade in the interior and have a player. Well, and maybe they'll start him out trying to compete for a tackle spot. And then if he doesn't, he can, go for right guard or center.
Having a guy like Barton would definitely, set you up better to have like your best 5 out there.
And that's my thought here.
Yeah, I could see, Mims being like the prospect of Mims as like an athletic freak being tantalizing to the Packers. But it sounds like we think they would be between Newton and Barton.
Yeah, though Barton's arms are a little shorter. They're under 33 inches.
Yeah, that's,
So then you say, well, can he really be a tackle or not?
And that's, I think, something that they'd have to, decide how they feel on that. I'm leaning Newton. Do you feel really passionate about Barton, though?
Not super passionate, because I think there are some other prospects that I like almost as much, though they may end up gone by the time we pick again anyway, like Jordan Morgan or some other interior or Suomataya or some other
Zach
interior
Frazier,
offensive linemen, like
if they want to go center later. Yep.
Or Mahogany, like guys even later.
Let's take Newton.
Let's play Newton, because he's probably, they'll have a lot of drafts where I don't end up with a defensive lineman at all. So let's do something different.
Yeah, let's do that. So this is kind of, mock drafts are all about, well, what does this situation look like if this happens? And so what do the Packers look like if they go defense early in a position that, maybe isn't the biggest position of need, defensive interior, but when the best player available is there, a player who would probably be a top 15 pick if he didn't have, if he was able to fully test, he was, projected to go top 10, top 15 earlier in the draft process. I think they'd have a hard time passing on that. So now
it is essentially where we did go like the best player available, where he dropped a decent amount to get to be where we saw him.
Yes. So now we're moving down to pick 41. This is the pick that the Packers acquired from the Jets in the Aaron Rodgers trade. Players available here. Once again, linebacker Peyton Wilson. We talked about him a little bit. I think it would be a little bit more, I'd be able to feel okay about picking him here as opposed to in the first round. Another player available is Zach Frazier, center out of West Virginia. Real glass eater. Tough as nails. And, just a classic center. He is probably more of a guy who is center only, I would say. A little on the shorter side, although he is 6'3", 310, so maybe he'd be big enough to move out to guard if they needed him to. But it sounds like most of the people that I've heard analyze this tape think he's he's a true center. He's someone who, they love their tough guys at center. I think one of the things that they reportedly liked a lot about Myers was his ability to play through injury when he was in college at Ohio State. Zach Frazier's a guy who played a whole drive on a broken leg. So I think they would like that. It's pretty impressive.
He's another guy we don't have any testing for, so we don't know what his agilities or speed are.
Yeah.
32 and a quarter inch arms. So he's, I think, strictly interior offensive lineman.
Yep, definitely
interior
only.
We don't know how he compares to their what seemed to be really important shuttle time for offensive linemen.
Yeah. Another player who's available here that they might be interested in is Chris Braswell, edge out of Alabama. Although I would be a little surprised if they went back-to-back defensive linemen if they took Newton first, so I think maybe not. Same with Fisk. Jordan Morgan, tackle out of Arizona, you mentioned, is someone that they might be interested in.
I like him maybe more than Frazier as if they want to go offensive lineman here.
And
I also see
he's another guy who I think, some people think can play tackle or guard, and so that flexibility would be nice for them.
Yeah, he's a strong possibility. Now, one thing I want to think about with Peyton Wilson's left, Edgerrin Cooper's probably off the board now then. I've seen that happen a few times on the PFF mocks lately. They have Cooper going before Wilson, even though they have Wilson ranked substantially ahead of Cooper.
So what I'm looking at is... So you want to see whether or not Edgerrin Cooper is still on the board just in general?
He's already gone, yeah.
Okay. He is still available. His ADP right now is around 56, so around their second round pick at pick 58 is where the Packers are picking. But he is still on the board. I think it'd be a little bit of a reach for him here. He is someone that they have used, Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker at Texas A&M. They've used a top 30 visit on him, so there's clearly some interest there from the Packers side. They also met with him at the Senior Bowl, I believe. So they've met with him twice. He's a bit undersized. He's 230, 230 pounds, that is. Fast as hell, though. And is maybe someone that they would have some interest in. I think, to me, the top 30 visits are more about positional interest. So they're clearly interested in linebacker. We'll see if Edgerrin Cooper is the linebacker they're interested in. But yeah, so what are you thinking here? So it sounds like we're between.
So one thing I wanted to find out is how many. So I'm hoping to get one of what I think go to the top three linebackers listed: Peyton Wilson, Edgerrin Cooper, or Junior Colson. That if the Packers can get one of those, so at this point, all three of them are still available.
Yes.
So maybe we could pick a different position and hope one of them lasts until we come around with our second.
Yeah, and so something to keep in mind with, since we're trying to be predictive here with this Packers draft, is that in the first 3 rounds, and this is per Andy Herman on Twitter, Brian Gutekunst has only ever taken 3 players with below an 8 relative athletic score. And relative athletic score is essentially athleticism for the position based on your size. So that is just something to keep in mind. Brian Gutekunst loves elite athletes, so it's like, what is it? I think it's like 2. Oh, but anyway, everything but 3 of them have been above an 8. And the only ones that were below were Jay Sternberger, Amari Rodgers, and Jaden Reed. So only one of those 3 has really worked out so far.
Or as we discussed earlier today, depending on what position you think DeGuaro is or was.
That's true.
He's over 8 as a fullback, but under 8 as a tight end.
Yes, but either way, not successful either way, I guess we'll say.
Right.
But anyway, although he is someone they apparently could use that same 4-year deal they gave to Dylan, they could do the same thing with the
the 4-year contract thing. Yeah,
the bonus money that Dylan gets would have to be split between the 2 of them. It's like it's a weird thing. Yeah,
you can only do the equivalent of one of them.
Yeah, it's odd. But anyway, so it sounds like we're kind of between Peyton Wilson, Zach Frazier, and Jordan Morgan here at this spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they'll pick Fiske, who blew up the combine since they've already taken Newton.
Yes,
I don't think they would get another D lineman.
I think he would be on the on their radar just with how elite of an athlete he is.
If they had taken Mims or Barton in the first round, I think that Fiske would have been
I think it's Fiske. Yeah, I think he is.
been a good chance here. But my personal pick here would be Morgan.
I think they would go Morgan as well for the versatility. Really I'm tempted to go Wilson. We mentioned that he's 24. I think, we've seen that Brian Gutekunst doesn't necessarily care about age as much. Now, you remember he took Devontae Wyatt in the first round, who was a 24-year-old when they drafted him, or was like going to be 24 when the season started, one of the two. So they don't necessarily have like severe like age, like, hey, we don't take players who are this old early. So just that is not necessarily, I don't think, too big of a red flag for the Packers.
Yes, and we are looking at the second round now, not the first like we were earlier.
True.
So this is actually something I should mention. Like one thing I've been doing it very recently, is actually picking like Wilson and another linebacker in like this day 2. Mm-hmm. So getting two of the higher ranked linebackers.
It is
to
definitely
try to fill up
something,
that linebacker room.
It is definitely something where the fact that they didn't add anyone at linebacker in free agency is a little surprising. Now, we've seen them, go late into camp and add linebackers late, a la Devondre Campbell, and it worked out for them. But we've also seen, like, hey, let's trot Christian Kirksey out there. It's like, okay, that was something. I guess it was kind of okay.
Or Kamal Martin or Chris Barnes.
I was trying to remember Kamal Martin's name the other day for like an hour. I could not remember his name. I was like, what?
Did you finally give up and look at their draft picks?
Yes,
so you cheated and peaked?
Totally gave up. I was like, linebacker out of Minnesota.
5th rounder out of Minnesota.
We were all so excited about him because he had like long arms and he could hit. And
the first reports out of camp were like that he looked really good. His rookie training camp.
It didn't work out. But I think, going Jordan Morgan here makes a lot of sense. We gotta get this show on the road now. We're only on our second.
Do we want to get Wilson? I'm now thinking more about should we do Peyton Wilson?
Well, I don't think. It's a good question. I think it would be between Morgan and Wilson. Morgan, I think they would like more. I like Zach Frazier more, but I think they'd like Morgan more for his versatility. And I don't agree with it, but they seem to love Josh Myers. They seem to want Josh Myers to just keep being the starting center, for better or worse. So it sounds like we're between Peyton Wilson and Morgan. And, I said the age thing didn't, worry me for Wilson. The injuries worry me for Wilson.
Yeah, that's another thing.
So I think Morgan would be the pick here.
Let's go with more positional value.
Yeah, I mean, really good pass blocking grade from PFF is this last year in college for him. Really good run blocking grade from PFF. Good in both zone and gap. We know that the Packers have gone to a more, a more diversified run game. They're not like each year they've ran a little more gap than the year prior. And this past year, it was like close to 60-40 zone. I think if I remember, it was 65-35. So they're running more gap scheme runs than they ever have before. So having someone who's a little more versatile could be handy to them. And, he's on the bigger side, 6'6", 320, but people still think he could kick inside if they needed him to. I think Morgan makes sense. Anything you wanted to say about him? I know he's someone you're higher on him than I am, but yeah. I know you like him.
I've also heard a lot of different people say how much they like him. So decision made.
We're
not backing up on the mock draft machine.
Nope, not restarting it. So first pick, Jerjon Newton. Second pick, Jordan Morgan. Now we are on to the Packers' third pick, pick 58, end of the second round. This is their own second round pick. And here's, where things start to get a little interesting. Okay, so you have, in my opinion, it would be between Kieran Amegaji, tackle out of Yale, who's a bit more of a project and coming off of a quad injury, but
right. So he has no testing, but he's considered to be a good athlete.
Yeah, considered to be a great athlete. The other player I would think about here is Jonathan Brooks, running back out of Texas. Now, bringing in Josh Jacobs, I think means I'd be a little surprised if they went this high on running back, but we've been surprised by high running back picks before. Would not be the first time.
Yeah, it would kind of signal a different strategy of, we don't need a running back this year now, so we can get Brooks and wait till he's ready to at the end of the year, and then maybe take over one of the spots. Take over the number 2 spot in 25, and maybe take over the number 1 spot in 2026.
Yeah, that is the thing with Brooks. He tore his ACL at the end of 2023, so he probably wouldn't be ready for camp. Probably wouldn't be ready for a few weeks into the season. So it would be a bit of a half a redshirt year. Think along the lines of when the Lions took Jameson Williams and he had to sit for half a year.
He still argue whether or not worked out as much as they thought. I was going to say, though,
you can argue whether or not that worked out for them. But yeah, so I think it'd be between Omega G, Jonathan Brooks. I think Marshawn Nealand would be interesting here.
Marshawn Nealand's interesting.
Edge out of Western Michigan. A bigger edge, very athletic though. Jaden Hicks, safety out of Washington State. Here's where I think, we could go a lot of different ways. Christian Haynes, guard out of Connecticut. Linebacker out of Michigan, Junior Colson. Running back out of Tennessee, Jalen Wright is one of my guys in this class. I think he's crazy. I mean, he's just crazy, stupid fast, and I think he'd pair really well with Josh Jacobs. Who are the players you're looking at? Because I'm having a tough time narrowing it down at this pick 58, which I often do when I'm doing these mock drafts. 58's like a hard spot. Kind of
depends on what else I've done. Often, if I've gone like linebacker or lineman in the first two picks, I would probably almost certainly go Nealand here if I don't have an edge. We've already got not an edge, but we got a pass rusher already with Newton. Sometimes here at this point, if we've gone the way we have, I might pick Colson. It's a little bit of a reach.
Yeah, I could see it. He's a type of linebacker he's one of the only bigger linebackers in this class at 6'3", like 247. He's younger. He's only 21 years old. That Michigan defense, the Packers are a fan of what they're doing down there in terms of process. I would be interested. I feel like when I watch Colson, he comes across as like a little bit stiffer at times, but he's bigger and he's able to take on blocks. So I would be between, I think, in my opinion, Colson, Haynes. I'm not the biggest Jaden Hicks guy.
Like Christian Haynes as a possibility too.
Yeah, guard out of Connecticut. Did well at the Senior Bowl as just someone that I think has been rising up boards and could just be a plug and play right guard if they wanted him to be. But yeah, and then some more depth there if they end up liking Sean Ryan more. But I could see them liking Omega G. The torn quad scares me. I think it was a torn quad that he had. He had a pretty
it was a quad tear last year.
Then,
so I don't think he played that many games either last year.
Right.
When was that?
That quad tear
played only 4 games last year.
Yeah, and not the highest level of competition either. And, not being able to see him on the all-star circuit as much because of that injury. That would be, kind of like we really believe in our scouting type of pick where it's like, we think this guy, like we can, and we really believe in our coaching staff because he's really raw. They would need to, he'd probably sit him a year. And I don't know if they would want to do that with a second round pick, but maybe they would. But they do feel, I think they feel pretty confident in their tackles right now in Tom and if Walker.
I think the drafting of Morgan makes this less likely to pick.
Yeah, no, I agree. So it sounds like we're between. I don't think they'd take Brooks now that they have Jacobs.
I think they can wait to add the complementary back they need till like the 4th or 5th round even. For me, it's down to Nealand and Colson. So maybe you'd want to throw in. Though Tavondre Sweat seems a little less likely now too, since they've already picked a D lineman.
I'm thinking if it's between Nealand and Colson, I think they would go Colson.
That's where I'm leaning at this point.
Yeah,
this is drafting Colson, a little bit for needs, but it's getting to be kind of a desperate need. The options out there are pretty slim, unless they're able to swing a trade for somebody.
Yeah, and Colson's someone that we don't, I think, have full athletic testing on, if I remember correctly.
That's right. I just looked it up a minute ago. All we have are his measurements.
Yeah, height, and he came in at 6'2", 238, so actually a little smaller than I initially said.
32.5-inch arms and 9 3/8 inch hands.
And the thing with him is, like, it sounds like all the reporting we've heard is they want to play Quay Walker at will. So they would need a Mike. Like they need a bigger guy to play in that center of the defense if they want to have Quay just be out on the weak side linebacker and run and chase. But yeah, so I think I feel okay about Colson here. I don't know if he's like really the type of athlete they would normally go for, but it's hard to know without actually seeing what his testing is. And I guess we'll see that. I don't think the Michigan Pro Day is for like a week or two now. So I guess we'll see that down the line. But yeah, I feel comfortable going with Junior Colson based on the other picks they've taken. You feel good about that?
Yeah, the Michigan Pro Day is still 3 days away.
Yeah, so I guess we'll know if he's really a guy that they have all that much interest in then. But so you're down to go for Colson?
Let's go Colson.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just getting a little nervous.
I think it might be a bit of a
those
reach.
It might be a bit of a reach.
I think it might be a bit of a reach, but I understand why it feels like a need for them. Okay, so moving on to the Packers' first pick in the third round, pick 88. Now remember, they pick again in 3 picks. They have 88 and 91. 91 they got from a trade with Buffalo for Rasul Douglas. At 88 here, some players on the board that I would think they would find interest in. The first is Max Melton, brother of Bo Melton, corner out of Rutgers, has inside-outside versatility. He's actually someone, apparently, I've been hearing rumors that he's going to go in the second round, and that teams are really, really high on him, so he might end up going quicker or earlier than people expect. Another player that I think would be interesting for them is Trey Benson, running back out of Florida State. Really, really fast. I think an underrated running back in this class. And so I think he'd pair really well with Josh Jacobs. Another player I think they could be interested in is Mason McCormick, guard out of South Dakota State, and Dominic Pooney, tackle out of Kansas. Both of them, I think if I remember correctly, are in that sub 4.47 short shuttle group, where it's like if you're under that, you end up being a plus starter like 88% of the time. So it's like a cheat code to pick guys who are under that. Dad, what do you think? Anyone else that you're seeing here that you think the Packers would be interested in? I'm seeing Cam Kitchens here. I don't think the Packers would be interested in based on really bad athletic testing.
Just
not the type of player they go for.
His RAS is like in the ones.
Yeah, it's not.
I think
good.
it's
and I know
athleticism. Off their board.
Yeah, athletic testing isn't everything, but for the
Packers,
Packers,
means a lot to the Packers anyway.
Yeah, and then Jerrion Jones was someone a little further down who was a slot corner that I was looking at. But
he's
think
one of my favorite slot. So I think for their slot corner options, there's like Melton, Jerrion Jones, or maybe Andrew Phillips. I think it's a good chance they end up with one of those 3. And so the question is, do you go for Melton now, or do you pick somebody else and then try to get Jones later? But I think did they meet with Melton at the combine or something? Not a top 30. Did they talk to him? I can't remember now.
I can't remember either if they met with him. Yeah, it hasn't been a top 30 visit that's been announced.
And there's no like edge that seems to be a good fit at this point either in terms of value.
Yeah, I don't love the depth of the edge class just in general. I'm not a huge fan of it. There's a couple guys later who I'm okay with, like Kamara out of Colorado State I like. Mm-hmm. But to me, I would be leaning Melton here. I think, maybe it's just partially the fan of me, but 9.6 relative athletic score, if I remember correctly, can play inside, can play outside, good speed. You could argue if you like Jerrion Jones more, but I do still think they need an upgraded slot corner. I know they're bringing Keyshawn back for that spot, but I think they need a better player there. Or would you go someone, and would you go an offensive lineman instead?
I do like McCormick as well. Those would be my top 2 picks here, would be Melton or McCormick.
Well, I think they can maybe bet that McCormick would make it back to 91, only 2 picks between here. But that I don't think Melton would. So I think they would go with Max Melton here.
Yeah, and he, I think, has some versatility. He's played mostly outside, actually, so he could be lined up outside as well if they need that.
Yeah, he's definitely a majority has been an outside corner per PFF, 490 of his like 500 and something, 550, 580 total snaps were lined up as an outside corner, 500 the year before that. So he has a little less experience in the slot than a guy like Jerrion Jones, who per PFF was in the slot like 394 times his last year in college, although he was a primary outside corner second to last year in college. I don't know. The more I look at that, the more I'm like, hey, could they just go Jerrion Jones here? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think they could, if they want to do that, I suspect they could go, let's say you feel like you really want another interior offensive lineman, and you take like McCormick now, and the chance that you would lose both Melton and Jerrion Jones in the next 2 picks seems really low.
Yeah, although, I could argue I feel good about McCormick or Pooney. and the odds of losing either
I
of
guess
them.
the answer is rather than play these games, you take the player you'd like the most.
Yeah, and I mean the player I like the most out of those is Jerry Jones. His size, what's his size? Because that's the big differentiating factor, I think, between. I mean, I think he's a little bit taller.
191.
Yeah, he's a little bigger than Melton.
Is 5'11", 187.
187.
So
he's
the weight
a little
is
bigger
pretty
than
similar.
Melton. Yeah.
A little taller.
But let's go with Jerry Jones. I like Jerry Jones a little more. Would you like McCormick that much, huh?
I think if we don't get McCormick, we still have options for like Rosengarten or Pooney and other offensive linemen. There's also Paul there, who's maybe more of a tackle only with how tall he is.
Okay, let's go Jerry Jones and let's just play him at slot corner. He played outside corner his second to last year also, so he's got some experience in both spots as well. Okay, let's go Jerry Jones.
Okay.
All right. Up next, we did lose out on McCormick, but Pooney is still there, and Melton is still there as well. So maybe we did the dance the wrong way. Who knows? But I would go Pooney here. I know Patrick Paul, tackle, is still on the board as well. I'm just, you know what they say about the 4.47 short shuttles. It's just, it just is what it is. The numbers are, it's like 80% of starters.
So Pooney also had that.
Not 80% of starters, but yes, Pooney did as well. He had like a 4.4 flat on his short shuttle. And as a guard,
did he have the best short shuttle of all offensive linemen this year?
That one I'm not sure of. I just remember the subset of players who were in that group.
His overall speed's not great, but both his short shuttle and his three cone are elite, and his explosion is also great with vert and broad.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy. Drink for Collinsworth.
Here's the guy.
6'5", 300 pounds, with 33 and 3/8 inch arms. So decent arm length. Probably a little versatility there. Was a tackle in college, but as a guard has like a RAS of like 8. He played left guard his second to last year in college, and then played left tackle his last year in college. So some versatility there as well. Do you feel good about Pooney? Good athlete, hits that short shuttle number you'd want to see. Versatility. I think he's a Packers pick all the way.
I think Pooney's a good pick here.
Yeah, and
I think
he looked good at the Senior Bowl too.
You have two guys that can maybe play inside or outside in a pinch.
Yeah. Next up for the Packers, pick 126 in the 4th round. This one we're going to start getting a little more gap between picks, and we're going to have to start picking it up, Dad, because we're getting a little long in the time over just 4 picks here. Or no, I guess we made 5 picks, so I guess we don't need to feel too bad about it. For the Packers here, I think the players that I would find interesting are Mohamed Kamara out of Colorado State. He's an edge out of there. He was really productive. He had 14 sacks his last year in college at Colorado State. And I believe he's also a very good athlete. I think he tested actually better than most people expected. I'm just pulling that up really quick. Great podcast content right here. For him, though, and then another player I know Packers fans would be, jumping all over themselves to get is Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin, running back. So Kamara, an 8.47 relative athletic score as a defensive end, a little on the smaller side at 6'1", 248, but 34.5-inch vert is 80th percentile, 10-foot broad, 10.3 broad's 92nd percentile, and then he ran really fast, ran a 4.57 at almost 250 pounds is really impressive. But so Mohamed Kamara is someone I think the Packers would be interested in. Braylon Allen is someone that I think the Packers would be interested in, just to pair another bigger guard. Isaac Guerendo is interesting because he absolutely annihilated the combine and had practically like a 10 out of 10 relative athletic score. And then Cedric Gray, I think, would be interesting to them as well. Anyone else here, Dad, that you think that they would be interested
in? I'm a little less high on Braylon Allen now after they got Jacobs as a bigger back and they brought Dillon back.
So yeah, I think Braylon Allen paired better with Aaron Jones.
Right. I would have him as a pretty unlikely at this point to get picked at that position in the draft. I feel like Kamara may be the last chance to get a decent edge rusher in the class.
Yeah, I think so as well.
So, and we don't have one yet, and I think there's a good chance they'll pick one to have with Enigbare being out for whatever the first 3 quarters of the year. So, for me, Kamara is the pick here, since they don't have an edge rusher yet.
I like it as well a lot too. He's a little smaller than some of their other edges, but not by a whole lot. I mean, he's touching on 250.
Yeah, and he's maybe a little shorter, but he's got some good athleticism. I think at this point, if he was a little taller and a little heavier, he wouldn't be available.
Not be available. Yeah, that's the thing. Is like if you're looking for perfect players, you're not looking for them in the fourth, fifth round. I just wanted to look at what his arm length was in terms
32
of
32 and 3/8.
Yeah, I just wanted to look at what that percentile was. So his height is short, so 6'1.5", and this is compared to edge players and looking at mock draftable. He's in the 3rd percentile of height, the 11th percentile of weight, and the 22nd percentile of wingspan, and the 10th percentile of arm length. So he's definitely a smaller guy. Now, something that I think Justice Mosqueda was talking about recently is like you look at these other defensive systems that Jeff Hafley's system was based on, or where Jeff Hafley worked under. When you're talking about Robert Saleh and with the Jets, and then the 49ers, those are kind of where he's worked under the most recently in the pros. And you look at what they've been looking at in edge rushers, and they took Will McDonald in the first round last year, who's a very lighter edge rusher, who's, twitchy, smaller edge rusher, very bendy. And then, Leonard Floyd, who the Niners just added, isn't necessarily the biggest guy, or in terms of like just weight. He's got super long arms, but yeah, I could see them taking Kamara here. I'm really high on him just from a production and athleticism standpoint. Was able to get it done. But yeah, I like that pick here. I just wanted to, talk it through and see what you thought about that.
And there's been a few articles and podcasts out there talking about how this sort of Salah, and the rest of that tree has often had some lighter edge rushers.
We're talking about the big Ford, with San Francisco wasn't very big.
Pounders.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good pick. He's got some speed, so he could add a little bit of more of a speed rush, different look.
Dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the 5th round here, pick 169 for the Packers.
I already know who I want here because I saw him for a second, and you're probably gonna, if you scroll down, you'll see it.
Who am I seeing? Tyrone Tracy?
There he is. He is my favorite, like 5th round running back.
Okay, well, so just to keep in mind, so far,
I do like him as a running back in the draft. He's not the last running back I would pick. A guy who's available even later, who's missed some testing because he injured a biceps tendon. Rasheen Ali for
I forget where he is.
Baylor.
You might be right, but you could be wrong, as they would say.
Well, that about covers it.
I know, right?
No, not Baylor. Marshall.
Green School. You almost had it. But so some other players, I definitely like Tyrone Tracy a lot. Jaheim Bell out of Florida State. He's a tight end. I think he's more of an H-back in terms of if they want a guy to take that DeGuara role and just be better at it. I think he's really interesting. Nehemiah Pritchett, corner out of Auburn, is a guy I really like. Good experience in the slot as well as an outside corner. Looked good at the Senior Bowl. Believe he tested pretty well as well. He's someone that I think if they hadn't already gone Jarian Jones, Jarian Jones, that they'd be a little more interested in, because he is a smaller-ish corner. He's around 190 pounds at 6 foot, but really fast. Ran a 4.36 and a 1.49 10-yard split, which are both above the 90th percentile for corners. So I do think it would be between, Pritchett, Bell, and Tracy here. If you want to pitch me that, Tracy's just the best value at running back here the rest of the way in the 5th round, I won't fight you, because tell us a little about Tyrone Tracy and why you like him so much.
So I've watched some of his tape. He looks pretty explosive. He also used to be a receiver, so he's got some pass catching ability. He doesn't have that much tread on his tires. I like his yards per carry. That's really nice. So he's like that much yards per carry. He's doing some work on his own. His rushing grade is really his elusive rating is
for
like top of the chart.
For reference, he was at 6.3 yards per carry in 2023. He played at Purdue. Just wanted to put that out there if we hadn't said it. He's also an elite athlete, a 9.77 relative athletic score, He is 5'11", 209, so, sturdy. He's not small, but he's a little shorter. 40-inch vert, 10'4" broad, 4.48 40-yard dash with a 1.58 10-yard split, and then a 4.06 shuttle, and then a 6.81 3-cone are both above the 95th percentile as well. Yeah, I mean, I would very much like the pick here as like a change of pace back.
And his elusive rating is, I don't know what percentile it is, 163.5. It's like at the top of the chart there by PFF's elusive rating grade. 4.44 yards after contact per attempt is also near the top of the chart there. So those are all really good.
Yeah, and then, 65 zone attempts in 2023 and 47 gap attempts. So, he's able to run in both kinds of systems. Like you said, he has experience as a receiver, previously receiver. He's a little on the older side. If I remember correctly, he's 24. Is that correct?
Is that right? I haven't seen his age. He's a redshirt senior.
Yeah, so he's a little on the older end, but we did mention that, that's not necessarily a deal breaker for the Packers.
Especially we're in the 6th round now.
Yeah, he's 24. No, we're in the 5th round, but he's 24. He'll be turning 25 like midway through next year. But I think that's a fine pick, and we can go Tracy here.
Yeah, I like him. Okay, so we're moving on.
Yeah, moving on to pick 202, 6th round here for the Packers. Some players who are available that I think that they would possibly be looking at are Tanner Bortolini, center out of Wisconsin, Omar Brown, safety out of Nebraska, and then possibly Dylan McMahon, center out of North Carolina State. I think those would probably be the 3 that they'd be looking at the closest. What are your thoughts on any of those guys, or if anyone else that they might be looking at?
For me, I think the pick here is probably going to be Bortolini. It'll be their 3rd offensive lineman, tested phenomenally. And
he's another one of those short shuttle warriors who hit all those thresholds. He has experience playing a lot of different spots. It doesn't hurt that he went to Wisconsin, but he played center in 2023. He played left guard, center, and right guard in 2022, and he played right tackle in 2021. So he's been all over the place.
Yeah, and his athletic testing is great. I think the short shuttle, and to get a guy with that kind of testing who can multiple position versatility this late in the draft is something I don't think the Packers will pass up.
Yeah, a 9.97 relative athletic score, obviously on the little bit of a smaller side at 6'4", 303. Crazy that that's the smaller side, as a side note. But, above 95th percentile in pretty much every single testing metric and above 98th percentile in a whole lot as well. I think that would be kind of a no-brainer. I think
this is kind of the obvious, no-brainer pick here. This is the one I think we need to debate the least.
Yeah, I agree.
Based on who else is available.
Yeah, Bortolini in the 6th, I think, is a great pick.
So now we're up to the 3 offensive linemen I predicted. So I will be blocking all offensive linemen for the rest of the draft.
Yep, we've hit we're dangerously close to hitting the over for you. So yeah, you gotta hit the brakes there. Just a little.
I will be manipulating. I'll be gaming the system for the rest of the draft now.
However, I will say at this next pick 219, Dylan McMahon. Center out of North Carolina State is a player I like a lot here. Trey Taylor, safety out of Air Force, is a guy that they've apparently had some interest in and have met with. So that's one that I think
so he did his pro day and tested very well.
Do you have those numbers up with you?
I think they might. Let me see if I could find them.
Yeah. So while you're just going through that, I do think McMahon, similar to Bortolini, is a guy that I would be interested in them adding for mainly athleticism reasons. And I think is a guy that they would like because of athleticism reasons. 9.83 relative athletic score. He also falls in that short shuttle sweet spot. He's also a little bit undersized at 6'3", 299. He might just be a center, which, wouldn't be the end of the world, but would maybe be something that they would not be as interested in. Although he did play left guard and right guard, both his second to last and third to last seasons in college at North Carolina State, and then played center his last year at NC State. So that's just something to keep in mind.
So Trey Taylor is pro day, and it's interesting. Like the RAS card is sort of partially populated here on the RAS site as a 9.70 RAS, but the individual data is not in there. However, he ran a 4.53 40, a 10.3 broad, a 37.5 inch vertical leap, 4.12 on the 20-yard shuttle, 6.9, so sub 7 on the 3-cone, 22 reps on the bench.
What did he weigh in at, just out of curiosity?
He is 6 foot, 213 pounds, so pretty good weight.
Oh, so decent weight too, because I know like a lot of times when the players are coming out of the service academies, they end up being a little bit smaller.
They have to keep their weight down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he is 213 and 6 foot and whatever, half an inch, 4/8.
Okay. I think,
he's got good size, and he, of course, his grading on his play was excellent. So some of that before the test, I was like, well, who's he playing against? But now that we know he's also testing as an elite athlete.
Yeah, and he's a guy who is a versatile safety. He split his time pretty evenly between the slot, the box, and deep last year. And, the previous years, we're looking at 327 snaps in the box, but still 200 snaps as a deep safety and 160 snaps in the slot. So good versatility, good athleticism, a guy that they have already met with, I think, a couple different times. Yeah. I think it's very fair to say like this would be their pick here because they seem interested in this player as well.
The only other guy I consider as a late safety around this time, where when I was picking two safeties, it was either Trey Taylor or Dominique Hampton from Washington as a sixth round safety. But Taylor really looks like an elite athlete and something that I like Taylor.
Yeah, I could see them being interested in Oladapo out of Oregon State as well, just because they did just hire the as one of their quality control coaches, the guy who had been at Oregon State, I think is their DC and DB's coach, if I remember correctly. So there is a connection there, but I think Taylor makes the most sense, and we'll lock that one in. So 2 more picks to go. Pick 245. Could I interest you in Ataulia Tungavailoa?
I have been picking him in like the 7th round as a QB a lot. There's one other guy I want to mention. Let's see if he's still available. We've only got one corner so far, right? Intended mostly as a slot corner.
Yes, Jones.
Okay,
just to walk us through so far, we took Johnny Newton in the first, defensive interior out of Illinois. Jordan Morgan at 41, tackle out of Arizona. Junior Colson, linebacker out of Michigan at 58. Then we took Jerry Jones at corner, and then we're going to walk this all down later too, so I don't want to say them all, but that is the only corner that we've taken so far.
Yeah, so I've been looking at who could we get as a potential sort of late round outside corner option. Mm-hmm. And guys I've been looking at there are Marcellus Dial, mm-hmm. or maybe Miles Harden at South Dakota. I don't know if those guys are still available. These are guys I've been looking at.
So neither of them are available. I think they just went right before we were going to pick.
Both of them are gone.
Yes. At corner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're I think they might be gone by a little bit.
Maybe they just went. Oh, another guy I want to look for though before we go think quarterback is Ulofoshio. Linebacker.
He is available. Yes,
available.
Linebacker out of Washington is another freak athlete. We know how the Packers love those. I just wanted to say among the quarterback thing, I know a lot of people are going to be like, why would they take a quarterback? They have Love. Clifford looked pretty good. They said they were more interested in taking more quarterbacks. This is what they have said on, pretty much anytime you put a microphone near people, they're like, hey, like we're interested in taking more, like going back to taking quarterbacks. And you look at back, like when Ron Wolf was running the team in the 90s. I mean, they were taking quarterbacks left, right, and center and just, developing them, trading them away. You have a decent backup. You try and go 500 with your backup. Like if a quarterback has to miss a handful of games, it's a valuable position, and it seems more and more valuable. I mean, we see guys being brought in all over the place for like reasonable, like good amount of money deals. Like we saw Heineke last year. We're seeing Marcus Mariota get a good deal with Washington to back up whoever ends up going there as a rookie. I mean, players are getting paid a good amount of money to be backup quarterbacks, and the Packers seem to be interested in investing there. I don't think Tungavailoa would really be a good fit for them.
Yeah, and there may be some other guys if you're looking for a kind of a flyer. The guy I actually want to get here is Ulofoshio.
I like it because there is a linebacker need.
And they've only gotten one so far, so I think they need to add at least 2 this draft. And this is the late round linebacker I like the most. 9.66 relative athletic score. He's 236, so good enough size.
Yes,
a lot of these
and
late
6 foot only 6 foot, so he's a dense 236. He's not like not going to be super rangy or anything, but
I've looked at a lot of these late round, like 6th and 7th round linebackers to have some athleticism. Then we're running to guys who are like 225, 228, like the guy from Temple. I'm drawing a blank on his name. He's a good athlete, but he's almost like a big safety. And Ulafosio is a guy who's got a little bit more size, really good, really good athlete, 4.56 40, good elite vertical and broad, and had a good and a really good coverage grade from PFF. And his missed tackle rate, 11.4%, is not. It's okay. It's sort of middle of the pack. And I think he's a guy to give some depth to their linebacker room. I think they need to add a second linebacker this draft. And I really like Ulafosio. It is possible this is a pipe dream that we're going to be able to get him this late.
I don't think he's going to end up going this late, but we can only do as the simulator allows us to do. We're not going to pretend like every year we're like, oh, like there's no way he falls that far. I mean, do you
Somebody's
remember?
Gotta fall.
You remember what was it? Was it Hakeem Butler at Iowa State like 5 years ago? Was like getting mocked in the first round, and then like
then he just
went undrafted or something like that, or like went like the fifth
no, it wasn't. It was
round.
like it might have been something more like that. Yeah,
but like every year,
falling.
Every year there's players who just fall more than you'd expect, and every year there are players that get drafted way higher than you expect, and so that is what it is. Last pick in the draft, I do think the Packers go some kind of quarterback here. I think they're just going to want to take a shot on a guy. And, you could argue, I think a lot of these guys, so the ones available are Tagovailoa, Tua's younger brother, Sam Hartman, quarterback out of Notre Dame, and Keaton Slovis out of BYU. If those names sound uninspiring to you, it's because they are. But I do think, the Packers might, we talked about no one was very high on Sean Clifford last year, but the Packers seem to like guys who have experience playing the position. And that is something that all of these players do have.
So here's what I would say. Tagovailoa is a possibility. Yeah. He's the next kind of
available quarterback on the board. Yep. And he's a 3-year starter now. Started double-digit games each of his past 3 years at Maryland.
It's
a lot of attempts.
So you've got him pulled up there. I've also got Sam Hartman. They both have the quality that they were better in earlier years than they were this most recent year, at least by PFF ratings and production. So there's this big thing lately, a number of other people talk about it. Look at somebody's year, 2 years ago, not just the most recent year, to maybe look for somebody who will outperform their draft position. And the Packers did that with Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, Jordan Love, and had success.
Yeah, had a good amount of success. And the other thing, though, for if they're going to take a quarterback here, which I think just for this exercise, I think they would. Clifford, part of, I think, the allure of him was that he was a good athlete. And that's what Slovis is. Hartman is not, and I don't think we have any testing numbers on Talia Tagovailoa yet.
Yeah, so I must admit, when I'm getting down to these 7th round QBs, I don't know a whole lot about them. I'm just like, I think the Packers will take a QB somewhere in the draft, so
yeah,
I guess we'll do it now.
I don't think Slovis is particularly great. Quarterback out of BYU. You look at just like level of competition. Is been a 3-year starter though. Has good athleticism. I think if I was looking, it was just like a well above 8 relative athletic score if I remember correctly. Slovis Rast. 9.74 relative athletic score. So 4.6 40. He's got good speed. Very explosive. I could see them just, taking a dart throw on a guy like that. So I feel good about that pick. And it's the third to last pick in the draft. So that's the other part.
So at this point, I just feel like we're taking a dart throw, which is fine. Yeah. And so I'm not quite sure which part of the target I want to aim. I'm even aiming for. So we went for the athlete.
But anyway, in summary, this Packers mock draft, pick 25, Jerjon Johnny Newton, defensive interior at Illinois. Pick 41, tackle Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. Pick 58, linebacker Junior Colson out of Michigan. This is the pick that the simulator did not like the most. They thought it was a reach. Pick 88, their fourth pick, their first pick in the third round, their fourth pick overall. Jerry Jones, corner out of Florida State. Pick 91, Dominic Pooney, tackle out of Kansas. Pick 126, Mohamed Kamara out of Colorado State, edge. Pick 169, running back Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue. Pick 202, center Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin. Pick 219, safety Trey Taylor out of Air Force. Pick 245, linebacker Edefuan Ulufosio out of Washington. And pick 255, quarterback Keaton Slovis out of BYU. So that is our Packers mock draft for our first official on podcast live mock draft that we've done.
So here's the question, kind of holistically now. And I was thinking about this as we were wrapping up. Kind of how we feel about the whole thing. And I would say the one thing that I kind of regret the most is we only ended up with one corner.
Mm-hmm.
If I was looking back at where we might want to add something, an extra corner would be good. Would have been something they might do.
See, I feel like I would have liked one more offensive lineman. They only take 3 here. I think I would like to see them take 4.
Okay.
I think if they only take one corner, I feel okay actually, because I feel good about Jair starting. I feel good about Carrington Valentine. I don't know if everyone shares that sentiment, but I feel good about Carrington Valentine starting. Corey Ballantyne has shown that he can play in this league. He's not like a star or anything, but he can hold his own in this league. Keyshawn Nixon is a fine slot. Is a good floor at slot. And then you got Eric Stokes, and hopefully you get more out of him this year. But you're not like counting on him for snaps.
He's kind of the wild card. If he gets back to what he was rookie year, then you're feeling pretty good about the outside. Then
you're feeling great
about the outside corners.
Yeah, 100%. But tell us what you think about this draft. We'll be posting the image on our Twitter at FatherSonPacker for you to keep an eye on if you want just a visual guide as you listen along. And we'll be doing mock draft Mondays every single week for the rest of until the draft starts in a few weeks. Once again, that's at FatherSonPacker on Twitter. And then if you like what you heard here today, come subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We just did a free agency breakdown last week. If you want to go listen to that and hear what our thoughts on the Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney, and Aaron Jones moves were. So go ahead and give that a listen. And until next time, thank you for listening, and go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.